You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show. Now that that's squared away, let's start the show. Hey there, it's time for the show, The Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. Salt offers cash loans collateralized by Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. When you apply for a loan with Salt, there are no income checks, no credit checks, and no origination fees. If you choose to have your loan funded in stablecoin, including USDC, TrueUSD, or PAX, you may not even need a bank account. Salt offers comprehensive insurance for your collateral assets and keeps them locked in deep cold storage, where they are protected by a robust multi-sig process for the duration of your loan. With Salt's online platform or mobile app, you can track the health of your loan or make deposits and payments on the go. You can also pay back as much as you want, whenever you want, and wrap up your loan at any time. There are no prepayment penalties. Once your loan has been paid back, your assets are returned to you. Visit saltlending.com/Tatiana to sign up for an account and start exploring your options today. saltlending.com/Tatiana. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. I'm doing this show from the Hamptons, and I'm joined by Josh, who's in Berlin after just getting back from Denmark. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
Hey. Very good.
What's going on over there?
Oh, just got married, stuck it on the blockchain, and now I'm back in Berlin working on Vaultoro 2.0 and making sure the team is happy and fed here at the Vaultoro offices.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to be talking a little bit about tokenization today, so I think that'll be interesting with a good friend of mine, Martin Rerak, from the crypto business. I've been working with him for a long time. But Before we get started, I'm trying to think, is there any kind of stuff that we need to tell the audience about? I don't think so. Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a really nice summer.
I mean, the crazy stuff's happening right now. I mean, we've got Hong Kong going down. We've got China and US trade war escalating. And we're seeing the effects of that in the gold price and in the Bitcoin price. And it's the first time that I'm seeing in the media as people are saying, and these are news articles coming from actual exchanges, big, massive exchanges in the world, not crypto exchanges, saying people are moving into gold and Bitcoin for the first time. So it's very, very interesting.
Well, that's a good place for everybody to be going to. Do you... I have actually a friend who made a film called Tank Man. I need to reach out to him. And he just got back from Hong Kong where he was, showing his film. And it's about the Tiananmen Square incident. So I would like to talk more about that next time, but get a little bit more of a perspective because I don't really know what's happening with those protests. I know it's getting intense, getting violent, but the context is slightly lost on me. We'll have to have, it's Robert Anthony Peters, so people can look up his film Tank Man. Anywho, cool. So why don't we bring up Martin Rerak? Martin and I have known each other for years. He and I work together. He's the chief strategy officer at Tokenly, which is what I've been working with since Tatiana Coin. We also have a project called Token.fm. It's a music platform. And Martin and I have been working together on that for years. But he's also the CEO of Token Square. And they're doing a big rollout coming up soon. And I think it would be kind of cool to talk a little bit with him about tokenization and about, all the different things that he's been working on. So Martin, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Tatiana. Thanks so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure and a really interesting time as per some of the comments you guys have made about what's happening, not just in our space, but globally. So very excited to be here and very interested in our conversation.
Cool. So why don't you give us a little bit of background about what it is that you've been doing? Because you've been involved in crypto for a long time, but you have a kind of, I think, a finance background before that. So if you could just kind of run us through how you got to where you are and what inspired Token Square, that'd be great.
Sure, absolutely. So a lot of people use a fancy term called polymath for an individual that does a lot of different things. It's, I think more accurately, the phrase jack of all trades, master of none, represents kind of who I am. I'm actually a CPA professional. I come from a finance and operating background in enterprise, specifically healthcare enterprise. And then I had worked and grown a consulting company as well, a management consulting company. So I had an opportunity to see how a lot of verticals, the insides of a lot of different verticals, whether it was like aerospace or food processing or, software technology, et cetera. And I joined the space around Q4 of 2015. And the reason for me joining the space at the time, I was kind of looking for, what is the next innovative or kind of game-changing technology, if we want to use that terminology. And I was very intrigued in blockchain. I actually had been aware of Bitcoin since about 2013, but initially bought some Dogecoin, Feathercoin, and Quark Coin, I think it was called, because Bitcoin was too expensive at $5 or whatever it was, which is funny. And I find a lot of people have these kinds of stories. But I got into the space because blockchain to me really sounded like the next internet, right? Like this is an infrastructure that has the opportunity to, from my perspective at the time, and it's definitely still the same perspective today, the opportunity to impact so many different human interactions and business models. And it's quite fascinating. And I do distinguish the two, Bitcoin being a use case for blockchain technology as a currency or as a store of value, or as basically a mechanism for freedom, if we want to go so far, as well as blockchain, which is the underlying protocol. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell. And then what I've been doing in the space is, again, a myriad of things. So with Tokenly, we actually built out an identity platform, a commerce system, and a media platform for tokenizing media and doing fair revenue distributions and encouraging traceability. But as somebody who's been an investor, an advisor at, a mentor at Techstars, I've also been active in research in the space, having reviewed over 100 white papers for the ICO craze when that was happening, actually looking at startups and their models for growth. And I've actually found it extremely challenging and frustrating, even as a professional in the space, to really have a comprehensive source of high quality information and consistent sources of information. So the plan behind Token Square is really, this is a curated platform for news, media, and all things blockchain and cryptocurrency for professionals. Professionals that are possibly new to the space and they're looking to research or stay on top of it or explore enterprise applications, or professionals who are actively traders or builders in the space who also want to engage with the community and stay on top of developments across a variety of use cases. So that's myself and the project that I'm working on in a nutshell. And again, very excited to talk about tokenization and some of the other the use cases that we have ahead of us.
So you don't think that there are any current portals that are curating content in the crypto space, or how does this compare? Because
Sure,
that just
absolutely.
seems like an obvious thing that people should be able to, not just get like a big hodgepodge of whatever.
So the difference between curation and aggregation is that aggregation is effectively somebody's gone through and just collected a repository of Twitter accounts or websites that publish blockchain information, and they might use some natural language processing to categorize that. There's also some sentiment companies. So things that come to mind and platforms that I'd actually previously used are things like CryptoPanic. CryptoMood is something that is more focused on sentiment scoring. And then you have a variety of other aggregators, I would call them, but not curation suites, where news or something else is kind of like a widget. So, Messari, Blockfolio, and others will aggregate news, but it's not really effectively curated. So nobody's going through and actually providing quality scores for this or being selective necessarily with the news that they're showing. And it's very limited in scope. Really what we're building with Token Square, if you want to do our business is like blank, our business is like a hyper-focused LinkedIn plus Reddit plus Twitch, where we've kind of taken the best concepts from each of those three platforms and we've said, why don't we create a dedicated portal for blockchain professionals, that being a fairly broad term depending on what you're trying to do in the space, and make it extremely easy for them to have relevant information, research, opportunities to engage with others in a single platform. There's a lot of individuals that, no matter how much convincing you do, they're not going to sign up for Slack and Telegram and crypto Twitter and go on Reddit and, scour the web themselves. And they're not going to build out their own RSS feeds. And if you show them something like potentially like Crypto Panic, which is effective in some ways, it's not going to work for a lot of individuals because it's effectively a spreadsheet which just lists the latest news. So we're trying to build something that's a lot more comprehensive and intuitive than that, and really a portal to doing things in the space. But definitely there are aggregators and there are other people providing some services like this, but nothing quite comprehensive.
That's funny that you brought up QuarkCoin before. Sorry. Back because I remember listening. I really liked. I've forgotten his name, but he did the Money Masters movie.
Bill Still.
Yeah, Bill Still. That's right. And then he was bagging Bitcoin for ages, going, no, gold and silver. That's the only thing. Kind of like Peter Schiff still is. And then one day he just suddenly came out when QuarkCoin got released and was like, yeah, QuarkCoin, that's the next thing. And I was like, Bill, what the hell, man? What are you doing? Like, he's like, and he'd been shitting all over Bitcoin for so long. And then all of a sudden he was this huge QuarkCoin fan. And I remember thinking, what? I lost a lot of sort of respect for the guy at that stage. I don't know whatever happened to QuarkCoin, but
we have to have Bill Still on the show because that the Money Masters was a big red pill for me, or blue. I think it's the red pill. Same. Yeah, big time. That was a good movie.
Yeah, epically long. I think I watched it like 3 times because it was such a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it was much better than a whole entire grade of social studies. That's how I viewed it. I was like, I could have just skipped 11th grade and just seen that movie in 3.5 hours. Fine. I'd play it back a couple times.
Yeah. Anyway, I didn't want to sideline the conversation, but yeah, that was interesting because I hadn't heard that that coin name for a while.
You know what's really interesting, and it's really humbling when you think about, if you're trying to think about onboarding new users and consumers into the space. At that point in time, I was a finance professional. I'd work in a variety of environments, but it was such a complex concept to grasp that back then, eBay was actually a place where you could go and purchase paper wallets. Yeah. And obviously we know that if you're buying a paper wallet that somebody else has printed for you that has the private keys, it means that they have your private keys indefinitely as well. But I remember going on eBay and it was like you could shop for Litecoin and Feathercoin and QuarkCoin. And I have at home, I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's just say I bought like 500 Feathercoin at the time. It came in just little snippets of private keys. So I got this envelope, which is just cut out pieces of paper. And I still have this. Maybe one day I'll turn it into some kind of an art piece or something. But it was just little snippets of paper. And that was the way that you got it. And when I bought Doge, I had to go to Brantford, Ontario, which is, I think, where Justin Bieber and Wayne Gretzky are both from. But there's this company called Vault of Satoshi. And I just walk in and it's the first time I'd seen a mining farm. So they were actually operating a mining farm, and I remember just the whir of all the different miners running, and it was just like, I'm buying Doge because the mindset was, look at the price per unit, look at how much cheaper this is than Bitcoin. So also wasn't looking at market cap, but looking at price, which again is another fatal error. So it's really humbling to go back because as much as we're professionals that have achieved a lot in the space today, send yourself back to when you first got in the space and the learning curve that you have to go through to understand the potential. And, that's really legitimately just the tip of the iceberg of what we're looking at here with this technology. So there's just all these like little funny moments when you think backwards, and shitcoins will always be shitcoins, right? Like that's another outcome there.
Yeah. I mean, let's see what happens. I think Bitcoin is really the solid player. But traveling around the world, I did see that Litecoin, for instance, is being used more in Malaysia, and then Dash is doing a big play in Venezuela. So it'd be interesting to see if there's communities that or little economies with closed loops that are happening in certain geographical regions. But I definitely think Bitcoin. Very, very long on Bitcoin, always have been. that it will be the kind of the conduit amongst all these different trend coins that are just little trends.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't want to use the M word, but if we're talking about a currency use case or store of value use case in the space, it's difficult to, from a technical perspective, scaling aside, and I say scaling aside not because it's irrelevant, but because I firmly believe we're going to solve those challenges. But it's difficult to say that something is going to outcompete Bitcoin. It has such tremendous brand power behind it, such tremendous adoption behind it, and it has such tremendous value behind it. And, there's going to be imitators and there's going to be contenders. Just like in the commodity space, we have a variety of commodities that can be purchased as a store of value. I do believe that we will have alternatives to Bitcoin, but in terms of the mass adoption, in terms of being long on something, Bitcoin is that alternative, right? So,
and there's different use cases, of course. We at Vaultoro here, we're working on tokenizing the gold that our current users have for the trade Bitcoin between Bitcoin and gold, but they might also want to spend that gold using tokens and or crypto, in terms of, instead of just having a PDF with the ownership and the serial number and who ordered it and who insures it. They instead pack it into a token that they can send and pay for things. So there are other use cases of different cryptos out there, but as a pure token that's not backed by anything but the pure, A, the network effect, and B, the hash power, the raw, immense hash power that secures the ledger, really Bitcoin is king and continues to be king.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I wonder if Peter Schiff is a personality that is, for example, so partisan as a gold bug that he would object to the tokenization of gold. I've not heard anything from him about, the potential tokenization, but that is something that is actually applicable to really any commodity or any asset, and it's tremendous potential in that regard.
I mean, Peter Schiff's another guy I've lost a lot of respect for. I've been a gold bug. I remember following him years back, even before Bitcoin was invented, and always had a very high respect for him and his father. But this sort of cognitive dissonant hole that he's dug himself into is so extraordinarily big that I think he's finding it hard to get out of, and he has to keep convincing himself of the arguments that he's putting forth instead of reevaluating himself and looking like someone that contradicts himself. Because
maybe he's just faking it at this point. I mean, what's he going to say? You know what? I was wrong. Now he's just doubling down. I'm not sure he feels bad about it.
No, I think
what I mean? Maybe he knows it's ridiculous.
I think he's been on every single crypto show possible now. I mean, he was on Naomi's show the other day now. He's on everywhere. I think he gets more press on crypto press than gold press nowadays.
That's my point. See what I mean? That's his shtick. He knows it's ridiculous. Who cares? He gets everybody to pay attention to him, and he gets more opportunities. So I don't know. Maybe that's his whole. Maybe that's his whole routine.
Yeah, isn't part of the beauty that the naysayers could readily be accumulating, Bitcoin? Just like, gold naysayers could readily accumulate gold without anybody actually knowing that they're accumulating. I mean, this is the Kinder Egg surprise that we're waiting for, right? Like 3, 4, 5 years down the road, which is who was slamming all of this. And it turns out that, they've just been accumulating all the way up, right?
Yeah, definitely. We saw that with JP Morgan Chase. I mean, JP Morgan comes out, says that, on whatever it was, Monday, and says, we will fine every employee, whatever it was, if we bust them trading Bitcoin. And 2 weeks later, we find out that they've actually accumulated a whole lot of Bitcoin somewhere or through some vehicle. I mean, it's insane. This is typical large bank, because they know that this field is unregulated. So they can use all the tricks that they've used over the years to try to manipulate markets, which they're very good at. I mean, that's what they do. And, the crypto space is very manipulable.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that either. And it's really challenging when you have crypto maximalists that are also participating in that cognitive dissonance, right? Where they say like, these are free markets and it's going to change the world for literally everybody and provide financial freedom to everybody, when the reality is that in all cases with booming technologies or booming commodities, it's the early adopters that really end up in a disproportionate position. And that's the premium on the risk that you take, right? By being an early adopter, you're exposing yourself to risk that somebody 5 years down the road, assuming 5, 10, 15% of the population is actively using something like Bitcoin, they're not exposing themselves to that risk. So it just really, it's very interesting is a word I use when I can't think of appropriate words, but it's very interesting watching developments in the space and listening to people and listening to a lot of these different entities and companies and individuals having discourse on these topics, because there's so much cognitive dissonance everywhere, and there's so many just misinformed opinions, right? And so that's, again, interesting, this blanket term I'll use.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I mean, it's always been the case with Bitcoin because there is quite a steep learning curve and crypto in general that's just been constant FUD. And this is something we as a community have been battling. And, the thing is, I don't even think it's called FUD. It's just miseducation and people being fearful of a certain aspect that they don't understand and then propagating that as fact out into the wider world or their own social networks and followers. And then, other people that actually do understand have to come in and correct those opinions. And this is just an ongoing thing until the next generation of children that have grown up with this technology, who fully understand it, who even fully respect the speculative nature or the incredible amount of ups and downs that come with Bitcoin or crypto, and they actually live with it. They're like, "What? You use money that's not that stable? How boring!" So it'll take a generation until we have to stop educating, because these kids will grown up with it. I mean, the kids already are like 10 years old that were born when Bitcoin in 2009 were born, and now are already 10 years old and grown up with Bitcoin if their family were, if their mothers or fathers were heavy early adopters.
I don't know if anybody on this call right now appreciates the age reference, right? And being aged by your comment of 10-year-olds that were born when Bitcoin came out. But I absolutely agree. And another thing that's really interesting is if you look at something, for example, like Fortnite, right? So there have been digital marketplaces that have been tremendously successful, like, Steam in the gaming space that allows users to trade in-game assets and skins.
Yeah.
In creating these complex economies that have volatility and have stability. And digital is really native, right? And Jack Dorsey, he said, it was Jack Dorsey or Elon Musk, but the reality is that, the world is now natively digital, and it requires, or it would benefit from and welcome a native digital currency. And it makes sense that something like Bitcoin would prosper with that. Anyway, I don't want to go on a tangent because I just brought up gaming and tokenization, and you hit on a really key word as well, which is fear. And I think that fear is a very interesting human dynamic, because fear is what's motivating a lot of people to participate in this market that's developing. And it's also what's slowing people from participating in this market that's developing. And the biggest threat vector that I believe actually exists, and why bankers and enterprise and other people should really take the space seriously, is because Bitcoin in a way is a mythos, right? It's a religion, it's a belief system, just like the majority of the value in gold is a belief system. And belief systems are tremendously dangerous and powerful. And that's kind of where we're at in the space, which is super interesting.
Yeah, no, totally. It's belief systems, network effects, and fiat also is a belief system.
Sure is.
It's the belief that the shop down the road will accept my euro just like I accepted it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got expectations, and we've got belief systems, and we're talking about educating people about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, right? But if it's really interesting. Ask somebody who you think is an esteemed colleague who's not in the space. Ask them to, calculate 13% of $500 on the spot. And the majority of individuals don't even do that math. Ask them about what, a fractional reserve is. Ask them about the qualities of fiat money versus gold and how they differ, right? And a lot of individuals just lack any kind of fundamental education about finance at all. And, they might be exceptional engineers, doctors, nurses, teachers, whatever it is they're doing in their professional lives and their personal lives that they, attend to and do exceptionally well. A lot of people are somehow, for some reason, lazy or misinformed generally about economics and finance, which is really interesting, because we all chase money to pay for bills and to acquire things that we would like or things that we need. And yet when it actually comes to understanding why it's valuable and how to, retain that value or grow that value, most people are extremely misinformed, which I think is one of the greatest barriers to adoption of this technology. And the way that we eliminate that barrier is just make it stupid simple to use.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about, Martin, you and I have been working over at Token.fm and Tokenly around the music space and the content space. What do you think about tokenization, and what that looks like? Why do you think that some of the problems in the music industry haven't been solved yet? What do you think are some of the challenges that are going on? Because you've been working on this firsthand for a while.
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, first, it'd be valuable for any listeners who, are maybe not very well versed in terms of tokenization. So, realistically, when we talk about tokens, the most popular ones that we hear about are obviously Bitcoin, and then we have all these app coins, right? And they've received this blanket slate term called utility tokens because they have utility. You use them for something. And I think that that's a silly term to begin with, but it's at least a starting point. Tokens really are a vessel, right? Tokens are as much of a vessel for assets on blockchain, which is an infrastructure, as email is for communications on the internet, except, that there's so much more. But when we start thinking about tokens as a vessel for things, we can start to explore a variety of interesting, new, valuable assets, as well as ways of challenging existing problems where assets exist, but they're analog or they're digital or they're behind walled gardens or there's some inefficiencies, generally speaking. And then the other aspect of blockchain technology is the fact that we have this, immutable, traceable, transparent ledger, right, which is effective for publishing, communications, whether they're in a vessel or outside of a vessel. So when we apply those concepts to different verticals, whether it's tokenization of gold, real estate, equity, media, etc., we start to really what we have is a toolkit for solving a lot of different problems. And specifically in the media space, the challenges that they're facing is that it's a myriad of challenges, and they're not all correlated. So they have challenges right now with traceability and transparency and efficiencies for things like revenue splits. So when you have, for example, royalties that are coming into an artist, those royalties have to be split across a variety of parties, and those systems are inefficient today. The other challenge that they have is that streaming platforms have effectively commoditized music, right? Like the barriers to recording and publishing music are so much lower than they ever have been before. And we have these buffet solutions, like this all-you-consume solution that we've provided to users. And now these users really don't appreciate the value of media the way that they used to before. And we've completely, on our path from analog, CDs and records and cassettes that came with sleeves and were collectible and you could share them. And it was, in a way, something that you could consume, like listen to the media, but also collect. on the path to digital, we've completely lost all of the elements and benefits of analog. And I believe right now that, the number one revenue producing business in the media space is really concerts and events, because consumers are leaning towards experiences and engagement more than they are to music purchases. And I think the blockchain has the ability to solve a variety of those challenges. So challenges at the enterprise level or at the payments remittance level in the media industry and the traceability and all of that. But also tokenization has the ability to create collectibles again and create value for music, and to bridge, analog with digital as a vessel, where you could create scarce albums. And because it's a token, not only do you get to consume the music associated with your Red Hot Chili Peppers album, but potentially by the virtue of owning that album, you get to purchase tickets before anybody else. And, you create scalping resistance, or you get to participate in a chat with Flea once a month because you own the Chili Peppers album. And because it's all on the blockchain, you can also freely trade your album. So, you're over the Chili Peppers album, you want to trade it for something by Lady Gaga. I don't know why I say it that weird way. You can trade your album, right? And you could also start to create securities out of those albums, where artists could potentially come and say, look, I'm going to tokenize myself, or our band is going to tokenize, and we'll give you a share of our future concert revenues and things like that. So
would that be like an advanced Tatiana coin? Probably,
that would
right?
be like an advanced Tatiana coin. So, initially I own Tatiana coin, I get access to your library of music. And it doesn't even have to be a fixed library. Like, that's what's beautiful. Like, CDs were fixed, right? You got your 12, 15 songs, whatever it was, and that's it. Whereas today, with something like Tatiana Coin, as you record additional songs, as I could get access to those songs, right? So you can create these things like live albums. You could create collaborations. You could say that transparently and traceably that you're going to give 5 or 10% of, your proceeds to XYZ charity. Really, it's because I don't want to go on a crazy rant, which is, one of my vices. But it's really a matter of which problem do you want to solve in the space, because there's different solutions, and you could either just use blockchain for publishing and remittances, or you could use tokens to create, new forms of fan engagement, super fan engagement, rewards, perks, brand partnerships, collaborations. It's very exciting. But you asked earlier, what are some of the challenges with people adopting this technology in the media space? And I think it starts with the fact that when you talk to a majority of leaders in the space, and you bring up something like Fortnite skins. So, Fortnite is a video game, and, gamers can effectively buy outfits for their characters. And the revenues from those digital outfits that are not even tradable to other players at this point, there's something like 30% of all digital sales in the North American, media market. But when you talk to people in the music industry about blockchain or Fortnite or collectibles or anything like that, the first response is they roll their eyes, because, their 10-year-old is using that technology. So there's a bit of, I think there's a bit of that cognitive dissonance again. I think there's a bit of fear there. I think there's an element of laziness in terms of having to go through a cycle where you actually integrate and introduce new technologies. There's a fear about, being the first to adopt that and making errors with that technology. There's a lot at play, but I am absolutely convinced, and, I will bet on it, that 5-10 years from now, most digital assets will be tokenized. A significant amount of real estate and commodities will be tokenized. Equity will be tokenized. It's just a fantastic vessel that gives us so many opportunities to create efficiencies and to create incremental value. So I'll stop with that. But, if you want to explore a specific area of tokenization in the media space, then, I'm open to it. And Josh, I would love to hear more about what you guys are doing in terms of tokenizing gold, if that's something that you're doing. But you brought that up earlier when we were having a conversation. And I think that's also a great use case.
Definitely interesting. I love the fact, I love what you brought up before about artists tokenizing themselves. This is an idea of, I think, for a long time, and especially, I mean, Tatiana was the first in the world to do this with Tatiana Coin. I really love the idea of saying, hey, I'm an artist, I'm a street performer, maybe even, and it's almost like a share in the future of that thing, because as much as you don't want people to speculate with that, I remember, Tatiana, you said, I don't really want people to speculate because then the SEC starts looking and this and that. But the fact of the matter is, this is software that you cannot help what people do with this software. And by allowing a street performer or someone that's relatively unknown to start, airdropping coins onto anyone that puts money into their little guitar case, that as they become more and more famous, let's say, or successful in whichever way, maybe that token becomes more valuable because there's only a certain amount of them and they represent in some way or another a share of that person's success.
Absolutely. I love that use case. I think it's fantastic. That is definitely a security, right? Like that is definitely an investment vehicle, but I think it's an improvement to, or not an improvement to necessarily, but yet another alternative that is potentially superior to things like Kickstarter, like crowdfunding and platforms like Patreon, where by being an early fan of a particular artist or creator, you can actually benefit long-term in their career. And you could create a token that is a security. So, you will participate in future concert revenues and merchandise sales, et cetera, of that artist. But you could also create, a non-security, which says, this is basically a limitless mixtape or CD that you're purchasing. So right now I only have 3 songs and you're buying my album and it only has 3 songs, but you're helping me finance, 10 additional songs, and you're helping me finance, the next piece of art that I do or the next song that I record. And you know what, who knows, maybe I'm going to have a partnership 5 years down the road with Adidas. And because you were one of the very first people who bought my album, you'll get 20% off of Adidas products, or you'll get access again to concerts before anybody else. Or, I'm going to jump on and do live webinars and live chats and streaming with you because you are one of my early followers, or you own my entire collection of albums, which have been tokenized. And there's just this tremendous untapped potential for engagement and support of creators that is extremely challenging in the current environment where everything is fragmented. You have engagement platforms that are separate from consumption platforms, like streaming platforms, like Spotify or Twitch. And you have tipping that's fragmented, and you have membership plans on channels like Patreon or Kickstarters and crowdfunding that's fragmented. And you could create a really effective suite of tools for artists, which is really what we've attempted, not what we've attempted to do, but what we've done with Token FM, is the ability to tap into this technology in this myriad of ways. The challenge now is getting people to get over that element of fear and that basic, learning curve of appreciating the potential of this technology. And that's where I think we're still early. So when I talk about this future of tokenization, I think somewhere between, let's call it 5 years, that's when it'll be prevalent. But I still think we're a little early in some of those use cases.
One of the biggest fears I think people have is the whole regulation nonsense, because these securities laws, they came out a very long time ago. They were the whole world's changed, and the way that the SEC is setting themselves up is to basically have to go and audit every single project that issues a token, which is absolutely ludicrous. It's like having a centralized place where every website, if you want to put a website up on the internet, you have to get it first approved by the state. And I think it's absolutely ludicrous. And I think the Americans should definitely relook at what securities law should look like, because there are these use cases where, hey, someone shouldn't have to go through that. And as we stop regulating with such fine-tooth comb some of these things in terms, sure, you can set rules for sure. You can say, generally, you can do this, this, and this. Otherwise, we have to take a closer look. But to sort of not have this certainty and that's causing a lot of fear because it's ludicrous to be able to cut off the whole of America, who have always been at the forefront of innovation, lock themselves out because of craziness around regulation, and that's a very, very sad state of affairs.
It absolutely is. And when people talk about free markets and basically, blockchain and tokenization has this potential to lower the barriers to entry, right? So if you have real estate projects or equity investments today, those are typically limited to, what we would call accredited investors, so higher net worth individuals, where basically they're saying, I'm a high net worth individual, I have capital, and I'm willing to take the risks, right? And I think the rate of success for VCs and equity, for example, is 1 in 20, right? The rate of success for somebody going into a casino or buying a lottery ticket is far worse, but the exposure is also typically smaller, right? So we just need a framework that says, just like with Seed Invest and other equity crowdfunding platforms, or with non-security crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter, we really just need some clear guidelines, like you said, which says you can do this, and this falls under, this category of issuance or type of project, and that's okay, because the exposure per individual is extremely low, and it's a sizable risk. I don't believe that anybody and everybody should be able to speculate on everything. We have higher, household debt rates than we've ever had before, and people are not particularly good. It's very difficult. Even professionals have a hard time picking winning projects. But you're absolutely right. We're caught up in regulation where everything is effectively now being deemed potentially a hazard or security, and it requires all of this additional bureaucracy and process to just be able to use a technology in any capacity. And the best outcome from this, and the reason why I'm very happy that Libra came out with its plans, is it's drawing attention to the space in a meaningful way, which is we need some guidelines about, here's the 10 or 20 use cases for different industries, and you can do use case 1 within these parameters, use case 2 within these parameters, and only a selection of those should have that extreme scrutiny that the SEC is trying to apply. But we're completely missing any of those rails or guidelines today.
Do you think about doing that stuff somewhere else? Like we've done Tokenly and Token.fm in the US, right? And people ask me all the time, why not do it in another country? Why not? Like, what do you think the limitations are there? Is it because the US market for music is the biggest? Or I don't know, I guess the most influential?
I would say that, look, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. But the reality is that first world markets like the US typically have very similar regulations about what is and is not a security. They have similar definitions about who is and who is not an accredited investor. And they're equally behind in terms of any kind of framework or understanding of this technology and its potential for consumer use cases and for investment use cases. So, simply incorporating in another jurisdiction doesn't achieve anything aside from possibly having some, tax benefits. Because if you're looking to sell to consumers or investors that are in a jurisdiction that is regulated, you being somewhere else does not change that, right? Like, if you commit a crime from another country, that doesn't somehow wash that away, right? Like you still committed a crime or a felony or whatever terminology you want to use. So just simply moving jurisdictions is not necessarily a solution. You could try to launch something like, Token FM, like a media platform or a tokenization platform in a jurisdiction that is completely absent in terms of those regulations, and it's a Wild West. But we really want to get adoption in where we have these industries, where they're flourishing, right? Like where we have a significant media industry, and that's going to be North America, that's going to be, Europe, that's going to be places that have these regulations. And right now, all of those places uniformly are lacking proper frameworks for doing these types of things. So that's the challenge. There's advisories out there that will say, create your, launch your startup in Malta, or launch your startup in the Cayman Islands, or whatever it is. And it's like that's not a solution, right? Like that's a Band-Aid, and it doesn't really have the outcomes that we want. So that's really the short answer is anywhere where these industries are prominent and growing and have potential for creating value, you're going to encounter similar regulations.
Yeah, and there's jurisdictions like Liechtenstein, which is a small country in Luxembourg, which is a small country in the German region. Sorry, Liechtenstein is in Switzerland, but they have good regulations, and they are also part of the EU, which is kind of cool. But you have to have people sitting there. You have to have at least 3 people sitting there as company structure. So I think that puts a lot of stress on new startups. They want to be there with their families. You don't want to move to some strange country. You want to build your startup in the country where you're sitting, and that's, I think, also a big barrier. Is if your talent is sitting all in North America, then you don't want to shift them over to some strange country.
Absolutely, and it's not reasonable to expect that, right, of growth industries. And the latest proceedings and comments out of coming from politicians are accurate, right? Like, you can't legitimately kill Bitcoin, and you definitely don't want to kill the underlying blockchain technology. It's an anti-innovator move, right? So what we really want is framework for this technology and for deploying this technology. And I'm extremely optimistic that we're just still early, but this will be prevalent. So we'll see where it goes.
Great. Well, guys, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Before we go, Martin, if people want to talk to you about Tokenly and Token.fm, if you could provide some of that info. And then also, when can people start using Token Square? Because if they want something curated, this seems to be like a decent option.
Sure, absolutely.
It's great style, right? I'm like, it seems to be a decent option. No, I mean, I'm excited. I'm going to be on there. LTV is on there. I know you've got some other really good content coming out. So yeah, what's the story?
Absolutely. So I would say that, over the past 3-4 years, we've built a suite of, blockchain solutions targeted at, non-financial use cases that are intended to be extremely intuitive building blocks for consumer products. So whether it's payment remittances, tokenization, identity, things like that, if people are interested in building or integrating blockchain and token technology, Martin at Tokenly, TOKENLY.com is perfect to reach out. And then, if you're somebody who's active in the space and checking, news daily and wants to stay on top of, tokenization for real estate and where Bitcoin price is headed in a variety of different types of news, and you prefer something that's curated and saves you time, then, we would love to have you on Token Square. And Token Square is going to be launching this Friday in, just kind of like we're doing effectively a soft launch where we're going to have a variety of those modules and features available and grow out. So if you want to check out app.tokensquare.com this Friday, or just tokensquare.com on this Friday, we invite you to join, and there's going to be some perks for the early users as well, which I'm not going to announce right now, but again, very excited to have you on the team, very excited to have this conversation, and very excited about where the space is headed in terms of actual practical use cases. And thanks so much for the time on your show today.
Thanks so much, Martin. Great hang. Josh, any final words?
No, very cool, and good luck for the launch of the platform. I'm really looking forward to tokensquare.com. That's fantastic.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. Check out thetatianashow.com for more Tatiana shows. And also, if you'd like to grow your emotional intelligence, check out Proof of Love Cast, like podcast, but proofoflovecast.com for a show that I do with Dr. Stephanie Murphy from LTB, and also Lauren Kasovitz. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye. Bye, guys.
This episode of The Tatiana Show is brought to you by Voltoro. Voltoro is a gold hedging solution for the crypto community. One of the challenges of investing in cryptocurrencies is dealing with volatility. Keeping a diversified portfolio is a key to healthy returns. I keep about 10% of my crypto assets in gold using Voltoro. Voltoro allows me to open a gold wallet in seconds where I can easily trade with cryptos and gold. What I like about using Voltoro instead of Tether is that the gold in my Voltoro wallet is insured, audited, vaulted in Switzerland, and unlike fiat money, gold has increased in value for the last 20 years. Visit Voltoro.gold/Tatiana today and get 0 trading fees for the first 3 months. That is Vault, like a gold vault, and Oro, which is Spanish for gold. Voltoro, ole!
Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show.
What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com. Thank you for listening to The Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond.